Actually, Roberto said an important thing about the process, and he said it is complex. So I thought that it does not make any sense to try to show you an example session of the process. And I thought instead of concentrating about these two case studies, which were actually our first case studies here in Pisa, the CMM and TAUMus case studies. Why are they different? Why are they interesting? However, let's start from the TAUMus project, which was shown before also by Roberto. Why is it so interesting? Because, well, it was developed in Pisa. So it is not only an important piece of software, but it's also an important piece of this town's history. So we thought of preserving it. It had a dedicated hardware, which is preserved at the moment being at the Museum of Computer Machinery here in Pisa. And it was quite a pioneeristic work. I mean, nowadays we are pretty used to electronic music, but at that time it was not the case. I mean, and we had really tons of related material, which were given to us by Leonello Tarabella, one of the authors, like these two photos over here. I think that you can see my mouse. This is the TAU2 terminal audio, the dedicated software, the dedicated hardware, sorry, that I mentioned before. And this is the research group with Professor Pietro Grossi here. Actually, Professor Grossi also introduced an interesting concept, which is home art. He developed this music. He also drawn some nice pictures with his Commodore 64. So it was really a home art enthusiast. And nowadays we are all used to creative softwares and also creative coding, which is an interesting kind of performance art. What about CMM instead? CMM stands for Customizable Memory Manager. What does it mean? Well, managing memory is one of the most hard tasks for a programmer. What does it mean? We have, as programmers, sometimes we have to ask our computer for some memory, some extra memory, and we have to guarantee that we will give it back to the computer. Then we will free this memory and we won't try to access it again when this memory is free. This is a very simple example just to give you an idea. If we ask for some memory and then we free this, but we have still a reference to it, well, we may try to access this memory using this reference and it happens this. So this is a huge problem, and CMM automatized this process. So the programmer were not in charge anymore of this process. Just to give you the idea, this is part of the Java garbage collector mechanism. So it is quite an important software. Yes, Java, it is a well-known programming language. It is run by 3 billion devices since 1997, probably always the same. Besides jokes, as a researcher, I can say that research is putting a lot of pieces together and hope that your work will have an impact in real life. So this is really a once-in-a-life work for a researcher. However, Professor Attardi later dedicated to natural language processing, and he had excellent results also in that field. So I'm pretty jealous, I have to say, but I'm pretty proud to have had it here at the University of Pisa. So also this software is an important piece of the history of our town. Let's go back to TAUMus and let's see what kind of fonts did we have. We had three kind of different material: papers and sketches by Grossi and other members of the research team, but also source code and project specification. All of this was on paper. So of course we had to digitize that. We had source code. We had two different kinds of source code. First of all, we had some Fortran listings because the TAU2 terminal was not a computer. It just played audio, music, and the code was for an IBM 370, and it was the retrieved code was part of the code of the TAUMus interpreter. And then we had the actual TAUMus listings, which were basically the commands which allow the user to play actual music. The interpreter was a terminal, so you opened a session, basically how you open a session on a normal bash terminal on Linux, and you played music. What about instead the CMM source code? We were provided with the source code by Attardi himself, which sent us a tar file containing the old source code in 8 versions. So there was a pretty huge amount of source code, but we had few raw material. Indeed, we just had this tar file and the accompanying email, which is quite important and well deserving to be preserved anyway. So let's see how we instantiated the process by creating the workbench from the SWAP template. So the SWAP template is the repository from which we inherit the directory structure. And we all, of course, we did the same for the CMM software. Then we were able to create the depository, which contains both the raw material and the browsable source. This is an interesting point where the two software were different. Because for the browsable source, we just moved the files provided by Attardi in this new branch. Instead, in the case of the TAUMus software, we had to copy by hand the code by ourselves, because we had the code on paper. We could have used an OCR, yes, but sometimes the materials is not in a good state and the OCR is not capable to recognize well the text. So we had to do this by hand. And then we recreated the synthetic history, the development history, by adding the various authors, by creating the various versions. And the source code branch contains indeed the versioned code, and we can see here the two versions of TAUMus. Let's focus again on the differences between these two softwares. These are the versions of TAUMus, only 2 versions, while these are the 8 versions of the CMM software. As said, in the case of TAUMus, we had only few code, while in the case of CMM, we have basically a complete and potentially running C++ program. Potentially, of course, meaning that we could have some issues with the more recent versions of the C++ compiler. What about the related material? This is CMM. So as said, just really few things, 3 items. And this is instead TAUMus. These are not all files of related material. There is more. So what can we say? Somehow in a philosophical way, let's say, with TAUMus, we were provided with a huge amount of related material. And we can think that to tell the story of the software, if you think about it, it's quite a source of stories instead of one story. While for CMM, we have that the story of the software is told by the software itself. And it is it is very interesting, but they are really 2 different stories, two different ways to tell stories. Before concluding, I want to tell you that despite the scarcity of code, Massimo Magrini at CNR was able to recreate an emulator of the TAUMus software, and I want to share some of its music with you. So let's listen to TAUMus. Hope that you were able to listen to it, and thank you for your attention.